I would say what's unique about the approach is that it's something more synergistic in the sense that when I'm building things or creating things, I don't look at them just from the viewpoint of a builder or an architect, because what's interesting is they create, these professions, right? Where you're supposed to be an architect. I'm a builder. I'm a contractor. I do the different things. What I've been doing is kind of incorporating everything into it. And what I didn't realize is I use some level of intuition, which I think is what you're talking about. You can put 17 different names to it. And what happened is the buildings and things that we and I have been creating turned out to be attractive. And people didn't understand why. And I didn't understand why. And so it took, a lifetime and a journey to figure out what is it that's going into it. So I kind of have finally a better sense. And then what's fascinating is you find out many other people have been doing this for so many, thousands of years, trying to figure it out as well. But it's something that, I did it as being innate, just a way of doing things. And then you start to discover later what it is. And some things are formulaic, some things are intuitive. And what I found interesting is that it's not so formulaic. It's not about intuition. It's actually the two combining. And that's what makes those things special. So I say that's probably what I do, is take the formulas and build them with a little bit of intuition.
Okay. And what about some of these great mysteries from the past as far as buildings, such as the pyramids and so on? What does that tell us? How does that inform today what you do?
It really kind of gives more of a confidence to what I'm doing. So, for example, what I find fascinating about the pyramids, two things. One is that the actual blocks that they were using form this perfect, what we call the golden mean, or the golden ratio. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Nope.
Okay, we can
He's
talk more.
heard of it, though, I'm sure.
You have? All right.
Michael's a pyramid expert, so
I mean, it's a whole deep conversation.
He'll be fact-checking what you have to say.
All right, we should actually talk more about this, but I mean, so that, and then what's also fascinating, which kind of goes into everything, is the placement of them. And what I find really interesting is back in the day, back many, many, many days, even before Christ, because that's how everything's dated now. There was this search for this kind of energy, or this invisible energy, like the Chinese call it qi, right? And why they call it Reiki. George Lucas called it the Force. Everybody has a name for it. In Western Hemisphere, we call it energy. And it wasn't really known what that was. And so what the Egyptians were doing is what's interesting is if you actually, like in Gaza, if you look and you start figuring it out, everything actually started to fit onto a grid, onto the earth, before they knew what it was. And what I find fascinating about that is that they didn't have tools back then. It was like back in the days of Galileo when they're trying to look up at the stars and figure out what's going on. But they, with such accuracy, were able to place these pyramids, and they used these proportions as well. So you have the two things, which those two things to me are the most important, which is talking about proportions and ratios, which is something we put into it, and then also the location and the grid on the earth. And one thing that I found out that was interesting is, the Chinese, when they were doing Feng Shui, they were looking for this invisible grid on the earth, right?
And it pertained to astronomy too, though, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they were they would look up at the stars and trying to follow it, and they had these little, charts, and they were doing them for thousands of years back. And that actually came back more from when they were trying to locate graves and homes, because they wanted to make sure that this energy was moving through them. And what I found was interesting was they came up with this thing, the compass. And so this one actually says made in China. So,
well, everything today is made in China.
Yeah, but I just thought it was so fascinating that the Chinese are the ones that actually came up with north, south, east, and west. And, because back then they said there is this invisible energy grid that's on the earth. So when you realize that, as you now have a better understanding, that you can plot out, not only, here's what's interesting, not only can you plot out like the pyramids in Gaza, they actually, if you follow it, the shape actually follows like the shape of the proportion of the nautilus shell. I mean, everything starts to snap together. It's interesting because it's also, I think it has to do more with what we like and what we don't like. Because we've been building for thousands of years, right? And so what's interesting is the things that are still there are the things that we like. And so everything kind of fits to that. And if you start to understand what those two things are, you can actually put them into your projects. You can put them into your home. You can put them into a product. You can put it into your shoe. You can put it into your car. You can put it everywhere. It's like it's a hidden
you believe
truth.
what's pleasing to humans has stayed the same during all this time?
I mean, I think that we filtered out. Yes, the answer is yes. By the way, I heard you're an attorney, right? So
Yes.
So I'm assuming this is not
retired.
Okay. I'm assuming I have attorney-client privilege here, so this isn't being recorded at all, right? This is all private?
This is between you and me.
Okay, good. All right. But yes, I think everything's, we filter out the things we don't like. We absorb and we cherish and celebrate the things that we do like. One of my heroes is a mathematician called Fibonacci. And genius in the fact that he was able to distill a formula that defines almost everything in life. And easiest thing ever, like you don't even have to be good at math to do this. But the formula is the final number is the sum of the prior two. So it's 1, starts 1 plus 1 equals 2. Excuse me. 2 plus 1, 3. 3 plus 2, 5. 5 plus 3, 13. I mean, you can continue the series going all the way through. And what's fascinating about that is the formula in which life recreates. And so a cell starts as 1, it turns to 3, it starts 5. When a tree's growing, it starts out as 1, it goes into 3. The 3 turn to 5, 5 go to 8. Rose petal. All of the things in life that do this. And so, I mean, I just thought it was genius that the guy actually figured out the entire formula of life is just, take these two numbers and just keep adding them, like down the chain. The nautilus shell, the way it grows in its proportion, Da Vinci had it. And if you take that and you take those ratios, you can actually, those are the same ratios as the pyramid. That's the same ratio as that thing that Gaza falls. That's the same ratio as the blocks in the Colosseum.
Now, what is the ratio of the pyramid?
The golden mean, which is like 1 to like 1.6, and it keeps going on with this infinitesimal thing. But as far as the blocks that go in there.
So the ratio of the dimension of the blocks? Is
of
that
the
what we're talking
blocks,
about?
yeah.
Okay.
And so here's what I find fascinating, and I think why it works is it's also the ratio of the human body. So that same proportion that we're talking about is also a proportion of the thorax. It's the proportion of the perfect head. It's the proportion from the eyes to the mouth. And so it's actually in Mona Lisa.
And to be clear, that proportion is, just so I can go home and measure my
You're going to go.
It's 1 to 1.666?
No, that's a devil. No, it's 163. It's like 1637.
So I don't want that one.
Yeah.
One,
I think it's one.
Yeah.
One ratio down to 1.637, I think. Don't quote me.
And how do you get to that number? I'm a little bit lost on how we got to the number of 1 to 1.637.
So how you get to that number is if you take this spiral and you can keep continuing that transgression of that formula, and you were actually to kind of outline it, that's the shape that it creates.
Okay.
And so if you were actually to divide it, you get 1 to 1.6. And what's the real number? You got it there?
That's just the diagram of what it looks like, so that Jim can see it.
The Fibonacci sequence.
Now you got it.
That's it. The Fibonacci spiral.
Yeah.
An approximation of the golden spiral created by drawing circular arcs connecting the opposite corners of squares in the Fibonacci tiling. This one uses squares of sizes 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 8, 13, and 21.
Yeah, and it continues on. And so here's where it becomes interesting to me as a builder, as a artist, as a creator of structure, is in that people like the Shakers actually understood this. And so you take those ratios, right, and they ignored the 1. They started making the first drawer 3 inches. They made the next drawer 5 inches. The next drawer is 8 inches, and then they go down to 13 inches. And so that shaker chest became a classic, and nobody really understands why. And I think what's fascinating about it is somewhere within that reasoning and why you like it, it actually relates back to exactly how our body was created. Those ratios and those proportions are so simplistic, and when you see it, on some level, it resonates with us, and it somehow connects us, I think, to to that piece through the ratios. So,
And is this taught to all architects?
no. I mean, I don't know. I can't say it's taught to all architects. I think that's pretty broad. I don't know. But
Because you don't have a degree in architecture, do you?
correct.
Okay.
I do not. And I just did not want one. So, because I actually wanted to go on a journey and learn about these things. Because, and what I realized, which was, I was for years making these kind of proportions and these ratios, and it was on the little bigger, a little smaller. Okay, that feels good. And you never really knew what it was, right? You're just like, it was no understanding.
What about hanging a piece of art? Does this apply to that? Because, you know, and I'm not an architect, and I'm not known for being particularly creative. However, I do have to say, I think I have a pretty good feel for where to hang a piece on the wall. But I'm not measuring anything. It's just where your gut tells you it's right. And most people end up agreeing with me that, yeah, Jim, you hung it in the right spot. Whereas I do note that there's some other people that don't seem to hang things in the right spot.
Right.
So what would you call that?
I mean, it's two things. I mean, one, there is a general rule that, I mean, as if you're a designer, and this is not talking about what you're talking about, is usually you do 5 feet for center, and the idea for art is that your eyes want to kind of walk up to the middle of it. So that's a formulaic approach. Next level is what you're talking about, is that gut approach, because all piece of art is different, you know. And it's just that, I mean, you sound like you've had it. It's just like, no, okay. That feels right. I don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Something's there.
But not everybody's gut is the same in that regard.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a right and a wrong.
But when you hit, there's this certain thing, though, like from when you hit the right spot, like either a baby can like it or your grandma can like it.
Right.
You know, and it's so when you hit that sweet spot, if you don't hit it, there's like you got maybe 30% of your audience is excited. But when you hit it, you're like, oh my God, I don't know what that
now,
is.
Does Fibonacci play into this?
I mean, it does. It's actually, if we've done projects where, and it's not Fibonacci, it's just somebody who actually understood the formula of what we like, right? Like what's interesting. But you can apply the same thing to the wall, right? You know, and I've done projects where you've actually divided up the wall, and there's many different approaches. Like you can take a wall, for example, and divide it up into thirds, and you can hang the picture on the upper third. And there's some things that you just can't figure out because mathematically you're clicking something in your brain and you're like, God, I don't know what it is, just cool. And so, yes, it does play into it, but I think more importantly, the gut, and I think what's fascinating is you have, I think like, you know, in the Egyptians, they made a lot of blocks, right? You know, and someone's like, no, that doesn't feel right. No, make it a little smaller, a little bigger. And so those are the things that we're actually attracted to in life.
So, going back to the pyramids, were all blocks of the same ratio?
Most of the pyramids were created with that same ratio. I think the Mayans did a little different, but you know they also had other formulas that they were putting in there. But you have that ratio actually falls over the Mona Lisa. You know, it falls over Bill Clinton's face perfectly. You know, like 16 times over the body and the face. It falls.
Bill Clinton has the perfect face?
He does.
Even the nose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the nose; it's the connection. So you could actually take that ratio, and if you continue to take the ratio that with that number and expand it, it fits over the eyes, it fits over the head, it fits over the thorax. You can stretch your arms out, and it fits that way. Tom Cruise has it as well.
What about Donald Trump?
Donald Trump, no, it didn't really work.
Hence
there.
the reason why people are having such problems with Donald Trump.
Absolutely. If they had have known about this, we would have had a problem.